Ready to get to work today. Well, you probably have already been working, but on the Judiciary Committee. We're just going to jump right in. We have 2 bill hearings today. And then at the end, committee, I'll explain. We have a change in the order of what we're doing this week, but I'll explain that at the end of this committee meeting. So I'll go ahead and open the hearing on Senate Bill 53 and have Jason Thompson, our reviser, give us a bill brief. Thank you, Jason.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 53 provides that the attorney members of the Board of Trustees of a county law library in certain counties will be appointed by the Chief Judge and allows such board to authorize the Chief Judge to use certain fees for the purpose of facilitating and enhancing functions of the District Court of the county. The section that's amended is KSA 20-3127. This is the statute that establishes the Board of Trustees for county law libraries. I note in the memo, and you can see in current law subsection B that begins down on the bottom of page 1, for the counties other than Johnson, Sedgwick, and Douglas, which have their own rules, the Board of Trustees of the law library is composed of the district judges and not fewer than 2 attorneys who are selected from the other attorneys in that judicial district. The bill changes that membership, again, for all the counties that are not Johnson, Sedgwick, and Douglas, so that there will be not fewer than 2 attorneys who reside in the county, and they will be appointed by the Chief Judge of the judicial district. So that will be the law library board. It will be the district judge or judges and those 2 attorneys selected from those who reside in the county. And then the other point in the bill is current law subsection F, which begins at the bottom of page 2. The Chief Judge is authorized to use certain fees collected from attorneys for facilitating and enhancing functions of the District Court of the county. Again, counties that are not Johnson and Sedgwick, they have their own rules. But the bill is simply adding another statutory reference. It's at the very bottom of page 2. So that fees collected under KSA 20-3129 will be allowed to be used for district court purposes if authorized by the Board of Trustees. And those fees are taxed. It's a fee that the clerk of the district court may tax for case filings. So right now there's a fee that's paid by attorneys that the board can authorize to be spent by the district, by the Chief Judge. And this would also allow the fees collected on case filings, if there is one, assessed by the clerk. Those could be used for this purpose as well, if authorized by the Board of Trustees. The last thing, well, 2 last things. July 1st is the effective date, and this came to you via the Committee on Judiciary in the Senate and passed the Senate 40-0. Happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. What questions do we have for Jason? Representative Goddard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In those counties that are an attorney desert, where there might not be 2 attorneys, what happens in that case?
Madam Chair, Representative, that's a good question. The statute would say that the Board of Trustees would be the judge or judges of that district and not fewer than 2 attorneys who reside in the county. So they would have to be able to find 2 for the board. I guess if they can't, I don't know if there's a penalty for noncompliance, but maybe the proponents can kind of talk about that. But the statute does say it's supposed to be the judges and 2 residents of the county who are attorneys. So hopefully they can find 2.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions, committee? Okay, thank you, Jason. All right, we'll go ahead and call to the podium Chief Judge Grant Bannister from the Kansas District Judges Association. Welcome to our committee. Glad to have you. Your microphone, yep.
How's that? Maybe a little better. All right, thank you, Chairman Humphreys and members of the committee. I think Mr. Thompson broke it into 2 components. The one that I will speak to most of which deals with the funding aspect. But again, my name is Grant Bannister, Chief District Court Judge of the 21st Judicial District, comprised of Riley County and Clay County. And I'm also a member of the Kansas District Judges Association Executive Committee that supports this bill. All counties have law library funds that are established by statute. All funds stay local. The county law library funds come from two sources. First, from annual attorney fees, and second, from a small fraction of court filing fees. Current statute states that fees collected from the first source can be used for the purpose of facilitating and enhancing functions of the district court of the county. Pretty broad language. The amendment would simply allow the second source to be used for this purpose as well. Bear in mind, however, as noted by Mr. Thompson, it's the court trustees rather than the chief judge that determines or decides how the funds are ultimately spent. Absent this amendment, the result is the second source of funds becomes a stranded asset and simply an accumulation of funds that aren't being put to work, access to justice, or an improvement of the judicial system. When in reality, there are many needs that could be served by these funds to enhance each of those purposes, both for the public and the bar. A predominant example would be supporting a self-help legal center on both the county's website and a designated location within the courthouse, providing access to legal research and basic forms that self-represented litigants could navigate. Additionally, the funds could supplement certain technology that would allow greater access to justice and legal research. A few examples could include providing Wi-Fi access to the public at the courthouse, checking out devices such as a mini iPad. It would allow Zoom court appearances in certain non-evidentiary circumstances, which would allow litigants to minimize disruptions in terms of work obligations, childcare, and eliminate the barriers that travel impose for certain impoverished litigants at times. Some counties no longer maintain the numerous volumes of traditional hardbound books. Trying to stay within a degree of relevance, they've moved virtually or online or subscription services. Due to a shift in that demand, also trying to provide access to justice, many users would want to access such resources during non-conventional times, maybe the evenings or weekends. A shift to a virtual library accomplishes that in some respect. So, in our instance, where our courthouse is limited in space, we have chosen to house our law library with the Manhattan Public Library, and it includes computer terminals with access to paid Westlaw subscriptions that everyone, but particularly the public and younger attorneys, can access. The latter part, which kind of goes to the Rural Justice Initiative or attorney deserts. Manhattan's not as dire as some, but we have a shortage of attorneys as well. And that's a benefit that they've made note of, helps in their practice, helps their quality of work, and keeping the wheels of justice turning. Ultimately, we found that this fits their needs better than the endless, dusty, hardbound volumes of American Law Reporter. This can be one tool to address the lack of attorneys in certain regions by making additional resources available for self-represented litigants. We're asking the committee to approve this minor amendment that would enhance access to justice for both the public and the quality of legal research available to small businesses and members of the local bar, which is to everyone's benefit. I don't intend to speak on behalf of anyone else, but Jefferson County Attorney Joshua Nye, his schedule did align when the Senate heard this bill, and he spoke as a proponent, being in a rural area and recognizing some of the amendments that he thought would be beneficial to other similarly situated counties. But ultimately, the bottom line is I'm simply asking that a small amendment be made to treat both sources of funding in the same manner and allow us to put those to use for the betterment of the local businesses, the public, and the bar. Be happy to answer any questions if there are.
Okay, committee, do we have any questions for Mr. Bannister? I do have one question. So what is the, you said the small fraction of the court filing fee. Do you know what that fraction is?
I don't, and I don't want to misquote it. And I think you know this, but the fraction, or excuse me, the filing fee depends upon the case type of adoption, criminal, civil, and so forth. I said fraction. I believe it's a set amount, but it becomes a very small amount depending upon which case type it's associated with.
And so what can those funds be used for now?
Primarily the purchase of traditional, conventional, hardback library books.
Okay.
Counties that have the need and can afford a library assistant, it can go towards that staffing to some degree. It can also, I might not have made this clear, it can pay for online legal resources. Potentially, this would expand the confinement to just the law library and open up to utilization in the courtroom itself or other areas of the courthouse, such as a self-help legal center that may have some crossover with the law library, but could perform other functions additionally.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Committee, any other questions? Representative Osman.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you very much for your testimony. I understand the need for the bill itself to reform the law, but I guess I'm kind of curious as to why the underlying law is even there to begin with. It regulates county law libraries. Why isn't the county regulating their own law libraries?
And it would be conjecture on my part as opposed to any thorough legal research back into legislative history. And you note, as Mr. Thompson pointed out, that, well, not the three largest, but three of the larger counties have kind of carved out a disparate treatment for Sedgwick, Johnson, and Douglas County. But I think for some uniformity in structure and probably accountability would be my supposition on why it was originally drafted that way. As to why this isn't exactly your question, one source of funding was treated differently than another. I think that was inadvertent, and when it was changed to allow a certain pool of funds to be used to enhance the functions of the court, it was simply an oversight as I talked to people, and that the second fund was not inclusive of that. I'm not sure that was exactly your question, but just to expand a little further into that. Thank you for your question.
Okay, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Honor, for being here. I appreciate you taking the time. My speculation, and maybe you've heard something different, would be that as a general proposition, counties can't assess docket fees on district court cases. And so you've probably got to have some statutory authorization if we're going to use this type of a model. Now, I'm not sure what happens on the quote unquote county bar dues. I also happen to note in here that it talks about the County Bar Association, and I'm not really sure how many counties really have active bar associations anymore. Can you enlighten me on any of those topics?
Starting with the latter comment, not numerically, but I think that's probably accurate that with the fewer and fewer attorneys in a certain number of counties, that the activity of certain bar associations may be in name only now rather than much purpose or association.
Well, they're also more regionalized. Several counties get together and do their bar association things together on the same day.
That's certainly correct, where you have the Southwest or even Northwest Kansas, including handfuls. I think you might have pinpointed the answer as to the earlier question, the county's hands tied or inability to otherwise access docket fees on their own being in the control of the state. maybe that's why this had to be within the province of the state rather than counties as far as providing some governing documentation language on these expenditures and structure.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you for allocating me this time. I appreciate it.
Mhm. Yeah, so committee, there's no opponent, no written testimony or neutral. So I will go ahead and close the hearing on Senate Bill 53 and open the hearing on Senate Bill 71. And again, we'll have our reviser give us a bill brief. Thank you.
All right, thank you again, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 71 is the bill that increases the criminal penalties for the crime of buying sexual relations. It also removes some provisions regarding city ordinances for that crime, requires certain offenders to complete an educational or treatment program regarding commercial sexual exploitation, and requires the Attorney General to approve those programs in consultation with the Office of Judicial Administration. Dealing with a few sections here, and I'll try to hit them pretty quickly. I know you've got a lot of folks that like to speak about the policy. Section 1 is a new section that would require prior to July 1 of 2026 that the Attorney General consult with the Office of Judicial Administration and approve one or more educational or treatment programs regarding commercial sexual exploitation. The Attorney General would be required to adopt rules and regulations governing these programs, including the criteria for evaluating and approving them, any forms required to implement the programs, any requirements for staff who will be providing services to clients, and any reports, records, or other information that might be required to be kept or maintained. If those sound familiar, I think it's because they run other programs similar to this. The Batterer Intervention Program, I think, is the main one. So this is modeled along those similar lines. The AG would have to adopt these rules and regulations by January 1st of 2026. And that would give a little bit of time for programs to apply and be approved before they're implemented on July 1st of 2026, which we'll talk about in just a second. Sections 2, 3, and 4 are all Chapter 12 statutes, and the amendments are just to remove references to violations of city ordinances that prohibit the acts prohibited in the state crime of buying sexual relations. And you'll see later that's because the ability to enact your own ordinance is removed from that crime. So the municipal ordinance versions of buying sexual relations would not be allowed, and so those provisions would no longer be needed in the municipal statutes. That's the intent of those changes. Section 5 then amends the crime of human trafficking. That's KSA 21-5426. This is the first example of the current law educational or treatment program language that you'll see in a couple sections. Right now, a judge may sentence you to enter into and complete a suitable educational or treatment program regarding commercial sexual exploitation. The change in the bill is to say that on and after July 1st of 2026, the court may order you to enter into and complete the educational or treatment program approved by the Attorney General on that subject. So rather than the discretionary program we have now, this will be still discretionary for human trafficking convictions, but the AG's program will be the program that you have to use. Section 6 then gets into amendments to the crime of buying sexual relations, which is the big goal or the big topic of this bill. I note that current law violation of the crime is a Class A person misdemeanor on a first offense, and then a severity level 9 person felony on a second or subsequent offense. You also have a current fine of $1,200 to $5,000. And the court may order you to enter into one of these educational or treatment programs. The bill does several things to this penalty. It makes all violations of the crime, even a first violation, a severity level 9 person felony, so no longer any misdemeanor. And it increases the minimum fine amount to $2,000. So the range is $2,000 to $5,000 rather than $1,200 to $5,000. In addition, for convictions that occur on or after July 1st of 2026, the court shall order you to do the educational or treatment program approved by the Attorney General. So it goes from a may to a shall for these particular offenders. I do note that There is a provision in current law that prohibits you from having more than one diversion agreement for this crime in your lifetime, and that includes municipal ordinance violations. So there's a little language we crafted that says if you have a diversion agreement for a municipal ordinance that's now not in existence, that still counts. So if you have a diversion of any kind, you can't get another diversion. So we tried to make sure we weren't inadvertently allowing someone to have a second bite at the apple, so to speak. You still only get one diversion for this conduct in your lifetime. And then I note we strike subsection D in the bill. That's the provision that says a city may enact an ordinance or a county may enact a resolution that prohibits the same acts. So removing that removes their ability to do that. That's the idea with that strike. A couple more sections. Section 7 is the crime of commercial sexual exploitation of a child. This is another example where under current law, the court may order you to do a treatment program on and after July 1st of 2026. That remains optional. It's still a may, but you'd have to use the treatment program approved by the Attorney General under Section 1. And then finally, Section 8 is the diversion statute, KSA 22-2909. Under current law, if you have a diversion agreement for buying sexual relations, the agreement may include a requirement that you do one of these programs. The bill provides that diversion agreements on and after July 1 of 2026 shall require the defendant to complete the program approved under Section 1. So for diversions, it goes from may to shall, and a suitable education program to the approved program that the AG will do under Section 1. So hopefully that's kind of clear. Essentially, the two crimes that become may to shall are, the one crime is buying sexual relations, right? So if you're convicted under the statute or you get a diversion, it's now a mandatory treatment program, and the treatment program has to be approved by the AG. With the other ones, it's an optional program still, but it has to be the approved AG's program, not just a suitable program. The last thing I'd say is it takes effect on July 1st of 2025, but that's just to get Section 1 going and get the rules and regulations going. Everything else doesn't really happen until July 1st of 2026, as I kind of mentioned, with the specific dates in those sections. And it did come to you via the Committee on Judiciary in the Senate and passed the Senate 40-0. Happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Committee, what questions do we have? Representative Carmichael?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Thompson, I may have misunderstood. As I understand the bill, July 1 of 25, the penalty does increase. So that part of the bill is certainly effective July 1. It's the Attorney General approved treatment programs that come on board, I think, July 1 of 26.
Madam Chair, Representative, yes, a good clarification. So the whole bill takes effect on July 1st of 2025. And the main things that would happen would be Section 1, which kicks the process of approving the program, and the increased penalties for buying sexual relations, and the removal of the municipal language. So yes, all of those would be this year. And then the new sentencing provisions just about the treatment program are the ones that are delayed. And I think I kind of glossed over that.
There would be mandatory treatment in that 1 year interim. It just wouldn't be by an AG's approved program. Is that correct or not?
Madam Chair and Representative, it stays optional for that year. And I was trying to flip to the right page here.
I'll take your word.
It's, I take that back. In that specific crime, it does become may to shall order a suitable education program for that interim time. And then after July 1st, it's shall order the Attorney General's approved program.
That specific crime is
buying sexual relations.
Sexual relations. Right. We used to call it soliciting prostitution and some other names. Okay, thank you.
And that changes the top of page 8 if you're looking for that. The may and shall.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. All right, we will now hear from our proponents. We have quite a few. I'm going to ask you to keep your testimony to about 3 to 4 minutes, the proponents. And we will take questions at the end, with the exception of Mr. Klump, who has to go to testify with another hearing. So we're going to go down the order that's listed on the agenda, but after Mr. Klump, we will do questions committee, just because he needs to go. So, but I will go ahead and call up Mike Kagay, the Shawnee County District Attorney. Welcome to our committee again. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Madam Chair Humphreys. It is wonderful to be back. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I will jump right into it in the interest of time. Kansas, as reflected in my written testimony, has a proud and noble history of being on the right side of the fight against those who would oppress the vulnerable and those who would take advantage of them and indeed enslave them, because human trafficking is modern day slavery. What this bill does is it puts real teeth into the idea that we want to discourage the demand side of the human trafficking equation. What I mean by that is most of our legislation is targeted on the offenders who are committing human trafficking themselves, and this is great. Kansas has robust penalties in place, and they are very effective when we bring them to bear against those offenders. However, the Johns, if you will, the predominantly men who are purchasing sex and are creating this marketplace and allowing it to proliferate and inviting and incentivizing the traffickers to come to our state and our communities, we've essentially turned a blind eye towards them and their malfeasance. There is a growing awareness around the country of the importance of this idea that we need to actively discourage the demand. And so starting, I believe, in 2021, the state of Texas converted theirs into a felony. At that same time, I also was proposing a bill with essentially the same language to do what we're trying to achieve here today. Texas went first. I believe now there are 4 or 5 other states that have adopted that model, and we are attempting to join their ranks. This bill is about protecting the vulnerable, and I think that's something that, as I've said previously, Kansas has a legacy of doing, and that's something we can certainly embrace and continue to support today. I'll be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. We'll wait till the end. Yep. Okay, now we'll call up Mr. Klump. And you know who he represents, but he'll probably tell us as he introduces himself.
That is the protocol, isn't it? My name is Ed Clubb, and I'm here representing the Kansas Sheriff's Association, Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, and the Kansas Peace Officers Association. My pleasure to be up here testifying on this bill. I think this is a very important bill for us to be considering. The vast majority of these crimes, the crimes of buying sexual relations, are further victimizing persons that are being human trafficked. And that's kind of the crux of why we're here. This is really a human trafficking bill more than it is anything else. These crimes also expose the human trafficking victims to even a higher level of risk. They are often assaulted during these encounters. And it's important that we remember that buying sex is not a victimless crime. These people are truly victims in almost every case. I'm going to skip over the second paragraph of my testimony because there's others going to be talking about those issues. I want to jump down to the third because I think this is an important thing for you to understand. One of the many advantages to making this a felony is it goes out of municipal courts. And there's some problems with having it in municipal courts. It has nothing to do with the quality of the courts. But in municipal court, there is no central database for what goes on in the courts. There is no state database for municipal courts. So every court has their own data. It may be a file cabinet in some of the small cities yet. It may be a 3-ring binder. It may be an elaborate computer system. But every city will have their own record system, and it's not centralized. By making this a felony and taking this out of the municipal court arena, then all those transactions involved in a case, whether it be a diversion or putting a person on probation or dismissal of a case or whatever, will be recorded in the state database system for the courts, which is now centralized. And that's a huge advantage when new cases come up and prosecutors have the ability to see what this person has been involved in other counties, what cases may be pending, have they had a prior diversion or not. And so this is a really important aspect of this. The only way a case gets into a central database out of a municipal court is if it is a crime where fingerprinting is required. And then the fingerprint card at time of arrest has to go to the KBI. And the fingerprint card at the time of disposition has to go to the KBI. So that's all that's recorded at the KBI. There was an arrest, there was a disposition, and it'll say what the disposition was. It was dismissed, found guilty, pled, whatever. And so just that records keeping aspect of that will really help the prosecutors looking at this case. It'll also help law enforcement because if we arrest somebody and we look at the rap sheet, we'll see those things on there. And so that's an advantage that's not often thought about, and I just wanted to point that out. And I think, Madam Chair, I'll just leave it at that. Everything else I have to say is going to be repetitive by the others I know, so we'll just go with that.
Okay, thank you. Committee, what questions do you have for Mr. Klump? Representative Carmichael?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going back to the fingerprint card, upon arrest, there's a report to KBI. Upon disposition, there's a report to KBI.
Yes, it's actually fingerprint cards in both cases are submitted. A copy of the fingerprint cards retained by the agency to submit later.
But does that also show what the charge was at the time of the arrest and what the charge was, if any, at the time of disposition?
It should. Because that'd be part of the disposition if they were convicted of something else. That would be.
That would be at least a clue, assuming the card was completed correctly.
Assuming
a
it was
clue that
completed.
somebody had been convicted of this
Right.
offense.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I understand they don't all get done.
They're what?
I also understand probably they don't all get completely kept up to date.
I think we do a
especially
lot
on
better of that than we
dispos.
did because the KBI has a pretty good system now when they get an arrest card
Mhm.
and they never get a disposition card. They have ways to follow up on some of those, especially if somebody inquires about that person and they see that there's this long pending, they'll go back to that court and ask.
Thank you.
Okay, committee, any other questions? I do have just one if no one else has one yet. So what does that look like, the state court record system? Like so if it is a felony or if it's not in the municipal court, instead, like who has to report it and like what does that look like and how do you retrieve that information if you're trying to understand if there's
I think you're all
previous-
familiar with the new court record system that's been put in place. Prior to that system being put in place, every judicial district kind of had their own system, and so there wasn't any central record. Now that that's all centralized, and every county's in that now, as I understand it, now we have central record. So when the courts look at that, they're looking at every record in every district court across the state, and that's what I'm referring to is that. But with municipal courts, there is no state system. Every court is retaining their own data.
And so a prosecutor can access that data to look and see what number of, what other convictions this person has had? I mean,
Right,
that
the
kind of thing?
entire court record for that individual is going to be in that system. I don't know how that works with cases out of the old system, whether they all got rolled in or not. I don't know that, but there's probably people in the room that can answer that.
Okay, that's great. All right, thank you. We
Okay.
appreciate you being here.
Thank you for
Okay,
accommodating my schedule.
Okay, we will now have Angela Bowles and Terry Hund. Are you both going to come up or? And okay, from Project to Restore, and if you'll just introduce yourself when you get up to the podium. Thank you. Welcome to our committee.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am Terry Hund, and I am representing Angie Bowles that is not able to be here today. And I'm the program director for Project to Restore, which is a long-term program for women coming out of sex trafficking. I actually am here because I am the voice of the voiceless. Many of these women have no choice. I'm not going to read the entire testimony because that you have it before you, and many things will be said later. However, let's not confuse sex trafficking with consensual sex between two people. Sex is not a crime, but demanding sex for the use of force, fraud, and coercion absolutely is. And we all know that when a buyer pays for sex, they are entering into an unspeakable agreement of coercion. Behind the sale of a sex act, there is a person behind the scenes, most likely benefiting from that interaction. I want each of you to know that 90% of the survivors that we have served in our program were bought and sold by family members and since childhood. Generational vulnerabilities, and there's always the word of vulnerability when there's a sex trafficking or buying of sex is involved. The cry of millions of men and women and children are far-reaching. These victims have no choice and no voice, and they believe they have no choice or no voice. Buyers have a choice. Today, as elected officials, you have a choice, and we need for you to please say yes to protecting the victims, yes to curbing the demand and making it a felony of first offense, yes to giving law enforcement the tools to fight trafficking in our community. And in our years of work with survivors, we have heard so many stories that I can tell you the damage to these women is lifelong. They require intense emotional and physical and mental health services and 24/7 care. 99% of these women we have served have complex mental health diagnosis due to the trauma of being sexually abused and trafficked. So I come to you today on behalf of the victims. Most every one of these survivors have asked these questions. Why didn't anyone see me? Why didn't they ask? And we ask, who does this? She was 7 years old when it started. Her parents needed drug money and money to live on. At the age of 23, she escaped and arrived at Project to Restore. She's been in and out of foster care and in her teens during the incarceration of her parents, only to return to the parents after they were released. JC, her grandfather, trafficked her mother. Mom knowingly allowed JC's uncle to traffic her. Both were controlled by fear of the grandpa and the uncle because she was afraid they were going to harm her mom and her dog, which grandpa did later. AC ran away from home at age 16, angry at her parents and needed a place to sleep. A woman offered her help, and she decided to sell her instead. SJ was rescued. SJ and her parents were her traffickers. Programmed as a young child, sold to men all through high school and to college. I never received a dime from anyone. It was all arranged by my family. Sadly, the reality is that buyers want to believe it is consensual transaction, but it rarely is. Victims rarely have a choice. Buyers do have a choice. And it's clear the only way we are going to stop this crime is by making buying a felony. Please support Bill 71 in its entirety. The education diversion component is vital to changing the hearts and minds of those who believe that it is a victimless crime to buy sex. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And if you're able to stay, maybe there'll be some questions after. Okay, thank you. All right, next we have Kim Borchers, private citizen. Welcome to our committee. And you have something that you would like to be handed out to the committee, I understand?
Yes, I left it with your assistant.
Yep, okay. So we'll just go ahead and pass this out to the committee. Okay.
Chairman Humphreys, so glad to be here, and members of the committee, thank you. It's an honor. You have my written testimony in front of you, so I will not read it in its entirety, but I do want to, and I didn't introduce myself. My name is Kim Borchers. I'm here in Shawnee County, and I'm here as a citizen, but I also sit on the board of directors for Project to Restore. I'm going to pull out just an excerpt from my testimony, specifically focusing on the term sex work. The term sex work was created to put a positive spin on an industry that is filled with exploitation, including rampant trafficking. The sanitized language obscures the systemic abuse and coercion inherent in the sex trade. And by framing acts of violence and exploitation as work, it minimizes the gravity of these crimes and grants this industry unwarranted legitimacy. What I've passed out to you is what a sex buyer's advertisement would look like. And I was so embarrassed, I didn't want to read it before the committee because it's repulsive in spots. And all the more reason why we need to pass Senate Bill 71. 24 years ago, I walked into this building for the very first time as a young mom, testifying for a bill that was about protecting kids from pornographic material in their public school and public libraries. I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't have a relationship with anybody in this building. 24 years later, I'm a little older, wiser, a little grayer. I have some relationships with many of you. And I have to ask myself, 24 years later, those kids who we were trying to protect, how many of them might be trafficking? How many of them are users? How many of them are victims? I failed 24 years ago. My hope today is that we don't fail them, the voiceless, the victims. I know this seems like an impossible task. In 2025, I've got this phrase, dream the impossible, but start doing the possible. That's what Senate Bill 71 is. And I'll end with a story that I shared with the Senate. My eldest daughter, I remember she was about 3 years old, and I sent her downstairs to clean up her playroom. Her toys were everywhere. Anybody who has kids knows exactly what I'm talking about, right? 30 minutes later, I come down, and there she is standing in her pink tutu in the middle of that room and hasn't picked up a single toy. I said, Hannah, you haven't picked up anything. And that little thing turned around and looked at me, and her face was all red, and she had tears streaming down her face. And she said, Mommy, I don't know where to start. And I went over to her and I got down on her level. And I said, Hannah, one toy at a time. That's what I'm saying to the committee today. We're not going to fix this with one bill. It's one piece of legislation at a time. And that's why I would ask you to please support Senate Bill 71. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Okay, thank you. And we may have questions. Okay, next I'll call Sarah Evans Simpson, the International Association of Forensic Nurses, the Kansas chapter. Thank you for coming and welcome to our committee.
Thank you for having me, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for hearing our testimony representatives. Like we said before, my name is Sarah Evans Simpson, and I'm here representing the Kansas chapter of International Association of Forensic Nurses. I am the current communications director at large for the chapter, and I'm a practicing forensic nurse. You might ask yourself what a forensic nurse is, what we do. And our chapter actually represents nurses across the state, but as forensic nurses, we see and evaluate victims of violence, including victims of human trafficking, on a regular basis. We're in support of Senate Bill 71 because we believe by starting at looking at the demand and meeting the demand, it will decrease the exploitation of our victims that we're seeing on a regular basis. It will also help decrease this multi-billion-dollar industry that we're seeing across the nation, but also in our state. It's hard to believe that the state of Kansas actually sees victims of human trafficking, and it's a hard concept to actually think about. But if you open your mind and actually look around and see, these victims are everywhere, and we're seeing them on a very regular basis in all parts of our state, not just our urban areas, but also our rural areas. So we're in support of the bill, not only because of it will help in demand, but it also will help the offenders and the offender accountabilities. You guys have a copy of my written testimony, so I'm not going to read that. You guys can read that, but I will stay for questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate your perspective. Next, we have Lucy Bloom, the Director of Impact Strategies of Altus Solutions. Welcome to our committee.
Thank you, Chair Susan Humphreys. Thank you for passing these out. I have a flyer of quick talking points in addition to my testimony.
And go ahead and introduce yourself too.
My name is Lucy Bloom. I am a Director of Impact Strategies for an organization called Alta Solutions. We create and scale solutions to combat trafficking at the local level. I'm also representing National Center on Sexual Exploitation today, who submitted a letter not being able to be here. They are busy in a conference in DC. But several Kansas organizations signed their letter. Our organization, I'm based in Olathe, Kansas, along with the Homestead Ministries in Manhattan, Kansas, the Stop Trafficking Project in Overland Park, 199 in Olathe, Building Bridges in Overland Park, Move Your Mountain in Great Bend, International Public Policy Institute in Barrington, and Center for Combating Human Trafficking in Wichita, Kansas. And that is an open, active letter that you will continue to see additional signings, people signing on to it. And in addition to my testimony, I want to say this is a very exciting day, I believe, in the state of Kansas, because I believe you all are experiencing an overwhelming support for this bill. It's a long time coming. It's been a long time in discussion. There have been efforts in the state of Kansas to put together a demand program, such as what is being represented here today in ReHope, that is based in both Kansas and Missouri. They are currently implementing a demand reduction education program called Stop Sexual Exploitation. And that program is mentioned in my testimony. It is a 12-week program that really offers, it's a non-shaming educational program that's very, very honest and really gets to the heart of what is the demand for sex. It has a 96% success rate of changing buyer behavior. So I wanted to make sure to highlight that today. It was mentioned already that in the state of Texas, it is a felony crime, and then Oklahoma quickly followed because so did the buyers. They went to find a place where they could get away with things unnoticed, not held accountable. And so now, if you go along our border, Parsons, Pittsburgh, okay, keep going across, all the way over to Liberal, Garden City, even up in Great Bend, you will see Texas and Oklahoma license plates at places known for selling sex. So it is important that our state follows suit to reduce the amount of harm that is being experienced by the women, men, and children that you have heard about already here today. I want to point out a couple of other statistics. Demand Abolition found that 85% of men who consider buying sex say the risk of arrest is an important influencer on their behavior. It is a deterrent to know that you would be arrested. It's even a better deterrent to know it is a felony crime. And it was mentioned in the neutral testimony that it is not known for sure if a education program for sex buyers is effective. And I would say we have compelling evidence that it is effective. There's also a study that showed, this was actually through prostitution research, that 53 to 72% of people who are commercially sexually exploited suffer from life-altering traumatic brain injuries. The same study revealed that 91% of those who exit from commercial sexual exploitation suffer a long-time PTSD. And from my experience serving hundreds of women, I will tell you it is complex PTSD, very difficult for them to build the skills to be able to live a thriving life. So this bill requiring individuals to participate in this diversion program actually is both an offer to hold those accountable who are driving demand, but also to give them an opportunity to live differently and to create a better and safer Kansas for all. There's one more state that does have this, that has this crime as a felony, and that's the state of Montana. So thank you very, very much for your time. I thank you for your service, and I hope that you will passionately join all of us who are in support of this bill.
Okay, thank you so much. Now we have Jason Alves, the CEO of Rehope. That, is he on WebEx? He's not there? Okay. All right, we'll go ahead to the next one, but if he gets on, Cole, you'll let me know. Okay, that's great, thank you. Okay, Emma, I'm gonna let you say your last name, Emma. And you are from Kaw Valley Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force from the DA's office. So educate us on your name.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emma Markowitz. I am the Human Trafficking Intelligence Analyst for the Shawnee County District Attorney's Office as part of the Special Investigations Division. I specialize in open source and social media investigations and provide comprehensive intelligence products to law enforcement to advance proactive human trafficking investigations. I'm honored to speak with all of y'all today on this legislation and share with you my experience working in this field. I felt called to get into this fight as a devout practicing Catholic. In college, I really came in contact with this issue and I realized what true horror human trafficking is. As part of this calling, I wrote an Intelligence Community Centers for Academic Excellence, ICCAE, funded project on the implications of the Russian-Ukrainian war on transnational human trafficking. As I continued to learn more, I realized that this isn't an issue only affecting war zones or our southern border. It's a problem in every town across America. I could start my testimony today by providing you statistics. Like the average age an individual gets into prostitution is 13 years of age, with the life expectancy of just 7 years following entry. Or that one nationally representative study found that 1 in 25 adult men had purchased sex within the past 3 years. The findings suggested that these paid sexual encounters may have exceeded 10 million and produced $1 billion in profit for the sex trafficking industry. While I believe that sharing these statistics might have been helpful or eye-opening, I also believe that it's hard to connect with numbers. An issue impacts us most when we confront it in a real-world way that hits close to home. One of the major rules I perform for the District Attorney's Office is to view online escort advertisements in order to identify potential victims, assess their risks of trafficking, and attempt to identify a potential trafficker. As of 1:30 p.m. on February 21, there are 172,034 online escort advertisements attributed to 53,995 profiles in just Topeka. When I came to speak in the Senate Judiciary Committee in January, the number of advertisements since then have increased by 722, with 199 new profiles being created. As the same date and timestamps, the total advertisements posted for the entire state of Kansas is 1,503,556, attributed to 302,176 profiles. The numbers of ads increased by 11,031, with 2,163 new profiles being created. Now, some of y'all might be wondering what an online escort advertisement is. These advertisements commonly consist of images of women, sometimes men, almost or completely naked. Oftentimes, these images are taken of advertised individuals by someone else, an unknowing person hiding behind this camera. These women are posed in compromising positions, putting on a show for male buyers before they ever even meet up. While these images are heartbreaking, oftentimes it's the text language of these advertisements that's the hardest part. The language of this industry is completely different. Discussions of the price of services, times, how to contact them, emojis, various acronyms. These all tell a story of what's going on. I want to share with you a handful of advertisements posted in the Kansas area so you can understand the language of human trafficking. I'm going to warn you, this is graphic material. The first ad reads, "No 16s." To give you a little bit of perspective on the language, the 16th letter of the alphabet is P, so this individual is representing pimps in their advertisement. The second ad says $100 for a quickie, which is typically about 15 minutes, $160 for 30 minutes, $200 for an hour, $300 bareback, which means without a condom, $150 full body massage with a happy ending, $100 for a BJ without a condom, and $80 for a BJ with a condom on. Add 3 reads, my rates are $100 for a QV, $150 for half an hour, $200 for an hour. Active specials are all 3 holes for $250, or no rules, anything goes for $350. Add 4 red, I got evicted about a month ago from my home, so I'm hoping to find a landlord or someone who has a room or house I could work to stay in, or we could work out a great mutually beneficial arrangement for rent. $200 for a quick visit, $400 for an hour. The demand for these services fuel the industry, and there is no doubt about it.
Okay, so Emma, so you just have a couple seconds left if you want to wrap up. Okay, yep.
One thing I will leave y'all with is that there are men who buy these services who then go online and post what they do with these women. And they talk about them like some online locker room talk, talking about their ass and their tits, if they have a belly growing on them. One of them even commented saying that they had baby damage. This is not okay, ever, in any state. And I ask y'all to join the other states in agreement with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. And so we don't have Jason yet. Okay, so we do have Jason Alvis's testimony written. So he was going to be WebEx, but he's not here. So make sure you take a look at his. Just a second. Okay, so committee, Jason may be able to get on. We'll see in a few minutes, but why don't we go ahead and ask questions of the proponent? So what questions, just let us know who you'd like to ask a question to. He just got on. Okay, we'll go ahead and hear his testimony. Mr. Alvis, are you there?
I am, if you can hear me.
We can hear you, and now we can see you. So you have 2 or 3 minutes is what we're kind of limiting our testimony to. So thank you for being here and welcome to committee.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm doing my best to pull that note up real quick. By way of introduction, though, I am the CEO of Rehope, and we provide long-term and short-term now residence and recovery programs for survivors of human trafficking. And so my testimony today is all about the survivor's view and an attempt to get at restorative justice for survivors. And this bill will help us get to that end. I was monitoring via YouTube before I was forwarded the link here for WebEx. So I did hear Lucy comment that we have reinvigorated and re-engaged our Stop Sexual Exploitation Kansas City class, and that is essentially the educational course that sex buyers can go through. I would like to just highlight a couple of things from my testimony. I do hope that you received it there in your packets of the other testimonies. But the bottom line is, without buyers, there would be no demand. And without demand, traffickers find it difficult to make money from selling human beings. Traffickers must find locations where there is a demand, or they'll have to choose to sell something else. In our 8-hour diversion course, which I just referenced, men that take that course learn about the dangers of buying sex, how their actions are fueling sex trafficking. We provide also education on the dangers of pornography and how that is driving their decisions to purchase sex. And we also begin to help them deal with other issues in their lives that trigger this type of behavior. So our goal in this part of what Rehope does to restore lives of trafficking survivors is to provide a starting point for restorative justice for these men and for survivors, and to help the men make better decisions. Too often, we've seen that the victims are exploited and forced to deal with lifelong trauma and societal changes, while the perpetrators receive a slap on the hand and perpetuate this cycle with little consequence. And And then the last thing I would like to highlight, it's already been mentioned, Texas and Oklahoma and Montana. And the point of all of that, the point of us bringing that up is that men creating the demand need to face accountability just as much as the traffickers do. So I believe that this bill will provide deterrence for high frequency buyers and a chance for healing and accountability for the broken men who are creating the demand, and ultimately, and potentially most importantly, for the victims that they have exploited and broken. This is a key point here. Victims seeing and knowing that exploiters are being dealt significant consequences for their egregious actions elevates their mental state and their outlook and assists in their recovery. This is restorative justice. So thank you, Madam Chair, House members, committee members, and I will stand by on this line for questions at the end.
Okay, that would be great. We may have some questions, and we do have your written testimony, so you know that we have that in front of us also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, committee, what questions do you have for any of the proponents? Representative Bourgeon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question would be for Mike Kage. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. And I would applaud you for your work in this area. I think Shawnee County, this is a priority and in large part to your leadership. I'm not as familiar with other counties, and so I'm wondering what your thoughts are with regards to the educational and the treatment programs, giving the counties the tools. Are there teeth here? Are counties going to use this? What assurance do we have of that?
Excellent question, and thank you for the opportunity to answer it. So prosecutors have almost unlimited discretion in how they choose to move forward when they file charges, what types of charges they file, what level they choose to pursue. What this framework does is it allows prosecutors to actually hold those buyers accountable in a meaningful way. Right now, the way the law is set up, if there was a buyer that was arrested in the city of Topeka, this is not something that would come to my office at all. So it would go to city court, and it would be treated essentially like traffic offenses that go to city court. I can't give you an assurance for what another prosecutor might do. I can't tell you what, thank you. I can't tell you what they're going to do. Oh, that's much better. Thank you. I can't tell you what they're going to do in another county because I can't speak for them. But I can tell you in Shawnee County, we are the tip of the spear on this, and we are going to take it seriously, and we are going to enforce the law consistently and fairly. There's been some testimony given here today about the buyers themselves. I don't think they're a malicious group. I think they're woefully ignorant of the harm that they're creating. In fact, I have had the opportunity to sit down and speak with some of them when we have charge cases that happened out in the county. And I can tell you that they had no idea the role that they were playing in creating this marketplace for sex trafficking. So a really big part of this is the awareness and the education piece. We're talking about a level 9 non-person felony, which is the equivalent of felony theft. You know, if I go shoplifting today and I go to Walmart and I walk out with $1,600 worth of merchandise, that's the offense that I'll be charged with. So we're not talking about something that's going to end in prison, right? But the demographic that are the high volume buyers in our experience and in the studies, they are people who generally have means. That's why they can afford to do this. Most of them have jobs and families, and they might be at church next to you. They might be otherwise upstanding citizens. And I can promise you, based on my personal experience as a prosecutor, this is the demographic that is most concerned with obtaining a felony.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Other questions, committee? Anybody? Okay, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate all the proponents being here in person and everyone in the audience. Thank you. Committee, also take a look at, we have written-only testimony from Matt Bengesser from the AG's office, Sharon Sullivan, International Public Policy Institute, Andrea, private citizen, Sherry Founts from the YWCA, Chuck Weber from Catholic Conference, and Morgan Wood from MoReb Forensic Nurse Consulting. We also have neutral testimony, written only, from Emily Brandt from the BIDS Legislative Committee. Okay, any other questions, committee, on this bill or anything? Okay, I'll close the hearing then on Senate Bill 71. Okay, and committee, I just wanted to give you a quick, we do have one thing I need to let you know about. Your schedule said that we were going to have, that we were going to hear Senate Bill 222 tomorrow. That has been changed to Thursday, just so you know that. So it's put out. I'm not making anything sooner. Tomorrow might be a bit of a lighter day. Then Wednesday, we have two bills. Thursday, we'll hear Senate Bill 222 and hopefully work any of the bills, 4 bills we heard last week, and then any of the bills that we've heard this week so far. So if you have any amendments or anything like that, please get with Jason. And we won't get to all of them, I'm sure, on Thursday, but we'll get to as many as we possibly can, just so we can keep things moving. All right, does anyone have any questions or comments? Representative Osmond? No? Oh, Representative Carmichael.
Just want to verify, so at present, the chair does not plan to be working bills Tuesday and Wednesday in this committee?
I do not. We're going to have a few people absent, and
That's
so
what I was thinking along the lines of, do
Mhm.
we need to find replacements?
Yep, no, we'll work on Thursday. Yep. Okay, anything else from the committee for the good of the committee? Okay, thank you, everyone. We're adjourned. See you tomorrow.